guys, hi Rob, Nigel here, Nigel's modelling bench. The hi Rob bit is a bit of an in-joke. Nigel here, Nigel's modelling bench, and today I've got a fresh new build for you. Why am I doing this? As some of you will already know, my mojo has been blasted. I've been messing around with a lot of resin rubbish and stuff, and I need to get back into making a model again. And these massive projects with all the massive bits of added detail and all that, they can really sap your mojo, particularly ship kits. I know that for me, certainly, ship kits are the biggest mojo breakers, because you get the hull together and everything, and everything's all lovely, and then it's just millions and millions and millions of guns and stuff. So basically, I've dragged this out of the stash, and I thought I'm going to build this. And the idea here is, here and now, today is Friday, September the 20th. 2019, and what I want to do is build this kit, and I'm going to do a bit every day and film it from now on, and I'll take you all the way through from start to finish, painting, weathering, decals, everything. Now I've picked this because it's a very simple kit. I've done a review of it, go back and have a look, it's the video previous to this one. It's a very simple kit. It's 1/44 scale, as you can see down here, and it's not very big. There's no interior detail, there's no super detailing to be done, there's no separate flaps or ailerons or anything. It's just a basic model to put together. So I thought, while I'm doing this, I'll incorporate some beginners or newer modelers tips in with this, because I've seen a couple of builds of this online, and it looks like it's got some pretty serious fit issues, especially the wings, and I want to try and show you how to get all that fitted up beautifully and make it all look nice. Now, it is Roden. Roden aren't the best kit manufacturers in the world. They haven't got a fantastic name, but they do go together nicely if you take your time and dry fit and take a bit of care. And I do particularly like Roden plastic. It's very nice to work with. So inside the box, if you've already seen the review, you've already seen all this, you've got our colour callouts, which I've been looking at. If you have got this kit and you want to build it, these colour callouts here, be very careful. They're telling you to use Vallejo 7994 for the main colour of the fuselage. That's actually not the correct colour. 36076 is not the correct colour. It should be 36118 as far as I'm concerned. It should be like a gunship grey. And also be very careful. If you look on the Vallejo website, or Vallejo is actually how it's pronounced. If you look on the Vallejo website, they give you alternatives, and for that colour, the alternatives they're giving you are Tamiya X18, which is semi-gloss black, Humbrol 85, which is coal black. You know, come on guys. So I think it should be 36118, which is basically Guns 305, or I think XF24. But really, if you're going to build this and weather it and everything, you want to start off a little bit lighter anyway. We might do some black basing on it, let's see. But just a warning for the newer modelers out there, don't just go out and buy these paints. I don't think they're correct. The other thing is, Vallejo, they are very good, they're convenient, you've got the dropper bottles and everything, but they're not the toughest paints in the world. I tend to prefer using Tamiya or the Guns Mr. Hobby paints. The newer AK Real Colour paints are really nice as well. They're really good. So there we go. So as I say, I'm going to start off with this kit as a kind of beginner beginner's video. So if you are an advanced modeler, stick with me. I'm not going to make it too basic, and if you are a beginner or a new modeler and you'd like to see a fresh video on sort of tools and glues and paints and everything like that, then just drop a line in the comments down below, and subscribe or whatever, and I'll do that. I also need to cover my new paint rack, which I've made with some instructions on how I made it. So first thing we'll do is get the instructions out, and the other thing I'm going to do is make sure these decals are protected. Now, if you are new, first thing you do, get your decals, put them in a bag. So we've got a kit parts bag here. Put them in a bag to protect them. Put them in the bottom of the box, and always put them face down, just in case. And if it is a bit, like this doesn't matter so much because it's a lightweight little kit, but if it's something big like the Airfix Hellcat with loads of sprues, best take the decal sheet out of the box and store it somewhere else, because you will see, like if you saw my review on that Kinetic P47, the 1/24 scale. They actually put the decals in the bottom of the box, face up, and then what's happened is all the parts have all been moving around on top of them, and it hasn't ruined them, but it's put all, like, if you remember, saw Phil Flory's review of that kit, he thought that somebody actually signed their name on the decal sheet. I don't think they had. I think it was just the plastic sprues all moving around on it. So first thing we'll do is get the instruction sheet out and have a look at what we're going to do. And if you are new to the hobby, it's worth looking at some of this stuff. You've got your health and safety, and you've got your legend here for what the symbols mean going through the instructions. Now, I think this here means port and starboard. Yes, it means repeat for port and starboard. And I think that's probably one of the only symbols we're going to get. Yeah, that's it. So there's no drilling by the look of it. There's no cutting bits off or anything. So first thing we're going to do is look at the actual assembly sequence. And what they're telling us to do here is add the nose gear leg and wheels to the nose gear bay, build up the main gear legs, build up the doors, and then we're going to build the engines, the tailplanes, the wings, fit the engines to the wings, fit these clear parts inside the fuselage, and then put it all together. That's not the way I'd suggest doing this. Reason being, if you do this first and then you glue that into the fuselage, when you've got the fuselage halves together and you want to sand the seam and everything, you can have this little fragile leg sticking out. So the first thing I'm going to do is check to see if that leg is too wide that I can't fit it afterwards. So we'll look at the fuselage halves and we can see we've got a slot there which is 5.5 millimeters wide. So we're going to end up with an 11 millimeter wide hole. So if I find the nose gear, which is here, and that nose gear leg is, it's only 7 millimeters wide, so we know what'll go in there, so we can leave that out and we don't need to put it in yet. The main gear legs are the same. We've got a massive open space to put them in, so we don't need to worry about that. We don't need to worry about building the undercarriage doors up yet, because basically they're there. We could go on and put the tailplanes and the wings together. We could build the engines. I'm going to start with the fuselage. So first thing I'm going to do is get the fuselage off the sprue. So I've got my little Tamiya side cutters here. If you don't have these, I would recommend getting some. I get them from a company in Japan called Plaza. They're £16, or £16 odd. And even if you do get caught with your customs, it's still cheaper than buying them over here. I've seen them for like £35, and you know, you can get them a lot cheaper than that. So cutting these parts off the sprue, and the beauty of these Tamiya side cutters, you can go in pretty close. As they get older and a bit worn, don't go right up to your part, but sort of just lay off a bit. They will pull a chunk of plastic out, but as this is on the main fuselage seam, which is going to be getting sanded and probably filled and that anyway, it doesn't really matter. So we've got our two fuselage halves off the sprue now. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at these parts. Now, I've left some sprue nibs on there, so we'll just get rid of them. And that's another handy little thing with these cutters. The bits of sprue nib actually stay on the cutters, and then you can go over to your little bin and knock them off, like so. So there we go. Now we can see straight away on here we've got some flash. Now flash is caused where the mold tool comes together, doesn't quite meet properly, or it's a bit worn, or the pressures are a bit low or whatever, and the plastic manages to ooze out into the gap. The opposite of flash is short shot, where you don't get enough plastic. Now I would much rather suffer a little bit of flash I have to clean off, because I'll show you how easy it is. I just come in with a knife, cut like that, and it's gone. Okay, or you could come in with a little sanding stick and just sand it away like so. Lovely, job done. Okay, now the other thing I've just thought of, I haven't actually washed these parts. I'm not going to bother, because it's going to have such a lot of handling and seam filling and everything, and seam work. I'm not going to worry about washing it, because it's going to be covered in skin grease from my hands anyway, and I don't like modelling with gloves on, even though my nails are disgusting. So first thing I'm going to do here is have a look around these fuselage halves, and I can see that we've got flash down in here. So let me just check you can see that on the camera. you can see we've got some flash. Now the way to identify the flash is if you turn it over, you can see here we've got a rib. Let's try and find something to point with. You can see here we've got a rib there, let me come in from the back, there, okay, come on camera, focus, there. So I don't want to cut that off, but I do want to remove the flash from around the edges that's not supposed to be there. So I'll come in with my knife, I'll just cut up the side of there. Oops, I've broken that off, which I shouldn't have done. Is that flash or is that supposed to be there? So I'm looking at these images here, I'm looking down here, it's actually not supposed to be there at all. That isn't a rib, it's just a fault in the mould. So we can actually remove that, cut it off from the inside as well, and then come along there. So sorry guys, yeah, I've misled you there. That rib isn't supposed to be there, I thought it was. So we've got an ejector pin mark, which is what's given us our flash. So they've put an ejector pin mark right in the corner in there, you can see in that wheel bay. So I've cut that off, and I'm going to come in with a flory skinny stick and just sand away where those ejector pin marks are. Just make sure we're nice and smooth on the back. There we go. In fact, I'll use this round shaped blade. This is a number 10 Swan Morton scalpel blade. It's great for getting into areas like that. So just cut that away there. And I'm going to do the same on this side. I'll keep using this round blade for this. Just cut away this flash. In fact, I'm going to use my cutters on that because it doesn't want to come away. That's quite a thick bit of flash there. I've never seen flash that thick. So we can just cut that away like so. And that's gone. And then I come with my sanding stick and again do some cleanup. So I'll carry on cleaning this up off camera and then I'll come back. Right, so I've cleaned up these bays now. All I've done is gone under the edges and scraped them with my knife, and then I've gone in with a skinny stick and sanded in there. These little bays here, these little holes in the top there where the jacks come through, where they can use air to adjust the tilt of the aircraft if it's on uneven ground for loading and unloading. So, just had a quick look over these fuselage halves. A couple of things to jump out. The pins, there are only two location pins, one there, and they're both broken off now. They were either broken off in the box or they were never there because the mould's broken off. So there's no actual location for the fuselage halves going together at all. I also noticed these antennae on the top edge. I'm going to remove them because they're going to get in the way of any seam filling, and it is in a very, very prominent area. If they were on the bottom, I may leave them and work around them, but on the top, I'm going to have to remove them. You'll also notice that they are, if I can get it to focus, you can see that they are actually raised on the surface where the actual halves go together. Yet in this half, there are no cutouts for them to go in. So quite often manufacturers do this. They'll put the antenna down the center line and keep them on center, and then they'll put a cutout in this side to accept it, but on this one there isn't. There's nothing there. So what we're going to do is cut them off, put them in a little bag and keep them for later, and then we'll put them on afterwards. A company called Metallic Details do an update set for this, and they actually give you photo etch antenna, so that's something worth looking into. But basically what I'm going to do here is cut them off. Now there's two ways I can do this. I can use a razor saw and cut them off, just basically cut them off from this side, but because they're so small I'm just going to use a knife. Now obviously once I cut them off I need to know where they go back on, so what I'm going to do is measure from the nose to the point where the antenna is. So here on the sprue layout you can see I've added these dimensions. Now for any budding engineers out there, this is the correct way to dimension something if you're working to positions from an ultimate datum. So rather than go from there to there to there to there to there, if you had, say you misread this by 1mm, those would all be out by 1mm too. So if you go from here, if I get that 1mm out, it will only be that one that's out. If I get all these correct, they'll all be right, and that one will be 1mm out. So this is the correct way to dimension from the end, if you're actually doing holes or positions, whatever, relative to one edge. So what I'm going to do is put the fuselage here on a vertical line like that, and I've got the nose there, so I can measure up from here. It doesn't need to be precise, and that's 49mm. So the first one is 49. I can write that in there. Then the second one is 66, so I can write that in there. The third one is 101, and the last one is, what's that? That's 152. Okay, so that's that done. So now we can cut those off. And to cut them off, I've got a new blade in here. And what I'm going to do, oh, the other thing I've done, I've marked them on the back. I've got 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes, and then the number 4. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, using my knife, I'm going to have the knife at this kind of angle. What I want to do is sort of cut them off like so. I don't want to be sort of losing too much of their length. So with the knife in like that, put my finger on it and just literally chop it off just like that. Okay, and it's that simple. And then last one. So that's the 4 of them gone. Now I did cut into the fuselage there, but that's not an issue because that area is going to be sanded and filled in that anyway. So pick these up, just damp my finger, pick them up and drop them in the bag. There we go, make sure there's 4 in there, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. Seal the bag up, back in the box. And now we've got these little bulges on here that we can just pare away with a knife blade. It's not always a good idea to go straight in with a sander, because quite often what will happen is the sander will rock over them. And there we go, so that's that done. Now looking up here, we've got an ejector pin mark here. Ejector pins are basically, when the mould comes together, they have to press it out, so the ejector pin comes and pushes out. You can see there's an ejector pin mark there and there's one there. So what I can do is, with my little Tamiya side cutters, come along and just remove that one because it's going to interfere with the fit. And then I can also come in with my knife and just cut it away like so. Now we've got nothing else here that's going to affect the going together, so let's have a look at this one. And again, we've got this ejector pin mark there sticking out, so I'm going to remove that. And there's nothing here which is going to affect it. So these fuselage halves should go together. What I am going to do is take a fairly coarse, hard sanding stick. This is fairly coarse. That's like a, I don't know, like a 180 grit. And I'm just going to gently rub over the area where those antennae were, just to make sure it's flat. And then go over the rest of the fuselage. I'm not pushing down at all, I'm letting the sanding stick do the work. Okay. You can see by the tiny bit of dust that's coming off, I'm removing hardly anything. And I'm just looking to see that the whole area is sanded, so if there's any divots or anything, I'm making sure I'm removing those divots. And another way you can do this, if you take a Sharpie, you can just draw a line along the edge, like so, like so. Round like that. There we go. And then we can come along with a sanding stick and we can sand until our Sharpie line disappears. You can see that in there it's staying, it means it's a bit lower. Now it's gone. Okay, so I'm not pushing down with the stick, just letting the stick do the work. I'm just rubbing over this. Like so. There we go. And you can see now that all that black pen mark is gone, and what we should end up with here is two fuselage halves that will fit together beautifully. Okay, so there we go. Right, the one thing I don't like about this kit is this. You've got fairly large glazing that goes on here, and all you're going to get when you look in there is just whatever colour you paint it, or you could actually paint the inside of the clear part black if you wanted to, but I don't like the appearance of that. I want to be able to look in there and see something. Now if you are a beginner, new to the hobby, whatever, you may not want to undertake this sort of work. So if you are new to the hobby and you don't want to undertake this sort of work, switch off now and wait for part 2, because the rest of this video is going to be all about me fitting this. Now this is an old out of an old kit. I think it's a Revell A380 or something, and it's basically a 144 scale cockpit, you can see there, and I'm going to basically fit this in here so that when you look in there you can see some seats. Now the interior of this aircraft would have been light blue with blue carpets and everything, so let's just see what happens if we get this to go in there. Now we can see that it's too wide, so I need to narrow it down. So what I'm going to do is remove, I've got my old cutters here. I never use Tamiya cutters for heavy cutting. So I'm just going to remove some plastic from here, just roughly to start with. What I'm trying to do is get this to go in here so it kind of sits in the center. All right, and this is just rough to start with. And there we go. Now when I put that in now, I know that's going to come over to the center, so I'm going to do the same on this side, cut it down to there and down to there. There we go. And then I can take the sanding stick and just clean up those cuts. So now we're in. Okay, so now we can just bring that in and go up like that. And the same on this side. We know that it will sit in there. Now it needs to come up a bit, so I'm going to take some material from the top. Like so. And then if you don't have an old cockpit out of an old kit like this, this would be easy enough to make. I mean, it's just basically a base and a few scraps of plastic to represent the seats. So now we can see that will go in there, it will sit in there, and it will sit nicely. Now it's going to have to come up some more. Now what I need to do now is remove this area of plastic here, and what I want to do is make sure I leave a ledge. So I'm just going to mark around with my finger there, and the same here. We need to make sure we leave some plastic there for the actual glazing to adhere to. So we don't want to take away that edge completely. Now the other thing I'll be careful of here is if I just go with these side cutters and cut now, the way side cutters work, they slide through and they push the parts apart. So if I do that, I may well put a crack in the fuselage here. So I'm going to start off with a saw. Now this is my little JLC saw, and and I'm just going to literally cut down into there like so, and that way I know that I can come in now on a V. I can just take my cutters and just break that out like that, and now I can cut away with these and not risk splitting the fuselage. You keep seeing my arm go off to the right here. I've got a little pot here that I use as a little bin on the side whenever I'm doing modelling. There we go. That's that gone. And then I can come in with a knife and just gently carve. If you are a beginner, be very careful doing this. You should always cut away from yourself like so. Make sure your hand's far back in case the knife slips, and always use a very sharp knife. Don't try and do this with a blunt knife, that's when you will slip and cut yourself. So there we go, that's that almost out. Just get it roughly, and then we'll finish off with sanders and get it all lovely. There we are, just like that. Do the same up here. Take some more plastic out of the middle, I think. Go with the cutters. Break that away. Just nibbling away like that, it makes it a lot easier for the knife to go through it. Just like so. There we go. There we are. Now I've left a nice thick ledge there for the glazing to stick to. So just get the glazing, see how thick it is. So yeah, we need to take some more off that back edge. We're going to see that through there. So just going to cut away this here, just thin that down a bit. I'm just going to cut it flush with the inner surface, and then we can get in there with a sanding stick and just sand that away. Okay, so I'll go on and get this done, and then I'll come back and show you how we finally get this cockpit to fit in there. Right, so I've got this all cut out now, and as you can see, I've got the fuselage halves taped and rubber banded together. Reason for this, as I said at the beginning, with Roden kits, dry fit everything. Dry test fit everything before you apply any glue. It's not like a Tamiya kit. Tamiya you can pretty much safely guarantee you can just glue them together. But with these Roden kits, you need to make sure everything's going to fit nice first. So if I get the tail end nice here, and I get all these panel lines to kind of line up here, we can see that the cockpit opening there is fine. But we can see that at the front, just check we're focusing here, we've got a step. You can see this side is higher than this side. Now if I level that out, then the nose has a step in it. So it's easier to deal with a step there than it is there. Now if you're building this kit out of the box and you're not doing like me with the cockpit, then you may be able to just sand it away after it's all glued together and get it right. But because I'm going to have a cockpit in there, and I've noticed for some images the cockpit instrument panel is quite high up and quite prominent, so I'm going to have to build this one up. But basically what I'm going to do is try and get this leveled up now. Now if we fit the clear part, we can see it fits lovely at the back, fits very nicely indeed. A little bit of blend in there and that'll be that. Now at the front we can see that gap there is prominent. Now just show you there, you can see we've got quite a gap. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to glue a piece of plastic card onto this side because I fear if I sand this side down level with that side, the canopy is going to tip forward and we'll end up with a gap here. So I'm going to take a piece of plastic card, glue it onto there, and then sand that to bring it all in. I'm not sure if this is just my kit, if it's a short shot, or if it's actually a fault with the mould. But you know, stuff like this, it's much easier to deal with it now than try and get in there and start sanding it or trying to fill in around the canopy and everything. It's better to get a really nice fit now, so you can just put the canopy on, run around with some extra thin. A lot of people like to use PVA glues and stuff like this, micro crystal clear. I like to use extra thin wherever I can on clear parts, because it gives you a nice solid joint and it gives you something to work with. You can fill and blend and everything. The PVA glues always remain a little soft in my opinion. So what I need to do is just glue some plastic card to the top of that there, and I think we got about a 10th step. So I'm going to get my trusty box of scrap plastic offcuts, and I know this is 10th. This is a pattern for the Hellcat fuel tanks, and that feels to me pretty flush. Now if I get a bit of something a bit thicker, this is 20 thou. Oh, that's better. So what I'm going to do is just glue a piece of 20 thou strip onto there, and then we can put it back together again and sand it. Right, that's glued on there now. And as you can see, I've got a piece of paper in here, and that is basically so that when I put the glue on the plastic strip, it doesn't capillary into the fuselage and join the two halves together. So that's what that's on there for. So that's been glued with Tamiya extra thin quick drying. So that should be, it's been on there about 5 minutes. So I could just trim that off, put that piece of plastic to one side, trim some off here, trim some off there. And there we go. Now if we just concentrate on the front edge, we should see now that the canopy, or the glazing should I say, it's not a canopy is it, the glazing fits a lot nicer. Now obviously that's going to be sanded and feathered out, but we can see now, look up there close, we can see that the gap has gone. Okay, there's actually still a slight gap there, but that's nothing, the glue will fill that. So there we go. So that's that dealt with, and now we've got some meat there to sand away. So I'll let that go dry and I'll sand that. I'm not going to mess with that now. But let's just get on with looking at the getting the cockpit in. Now I have done some fitting and everything, as you can see. I've been sanding this and removed most of the bulkhead, and at the moment it's still quite rough. So get this tape off. And I may put some tabs inside the fuselage as well to help locate it, because at the moment there is no location whatsoever. The fuselage can just, you know, slide about. So what I'm going to do is get some white tack. You can use blue tack, I use white tack, it's not as oily, and I can just put this in the side of the fuselage like so. And then I can put my cockpit roughly where I want it to go. Make sure it's square when you look on the front. And you can see I've cut it about so that I've looked at some images, and it looks like the seats sort of come halfway up the glazing, so that's what I've done there. So that's in there like that, and then when we put the two fuselage halves together, we should see that we've got our cockpit in there. Now it's over a bit that way because of the blue tack. So what I'm going to do now is, while that's in place, once again I can take some of my scrap plastic. Let's get that canopy out of the way, we don't want to drip any glue on that. Takes my box of scrap plastic parts and just take there's a piece there. So what I'm going to do is just literally make a little buttress. It's a bit thick really. Make a little buttress, and I need right angles. And then I can stick that, get the tweezers. I can stick that in there like so. Now I need to take a bit more off of that bottom corner. I can just stick that there, and that's going to be where it's going to end up. So that's going to position the rear of the cockpit there. Just turn that over and try it the other way. Yeah, that's better. So I can just put a drop of extra thin on that. Just a small drop just to hold it in there, and then I'm just going to move it up and away from that blue tack. In fact, I'll put it square on, like so. And all that's going to do is just give me a permanent marker for where that cockpit goes. And then I can put one, do a similar thing here under the front. Let's get something a bit thinner. Here we go. So just cut the corner off of this one. Like so. And then again, that should go in there. So I'll put some extra thin on this and just put that down in there like so, and that gives me a position where it's going to sit there. So you get the idea. It's all a bit rough and everything, rough and ready, because I'm doing it live on camera. You could really take your time and get this really neat, but no one's ever going to see it anyway, so and there we go. So those markers are in place now, so I can take out the blue tack, and then I can put my cockpit in, and I've got my positions there where it goes. Okay, so if I put the other side on, we should be able to see now that we're a bit more central. Nope, we need to take some more meat off of that side. So I'll go on and do that, and then I'll be back. Okay, so done a bit off of camera here now. So those parts there, I just went in with some super glue afterwards and some activator. The activator actually attacked the plastic, so be a little bit careful with that if you are doing this kit, or probably any Roden kit, because probably all the plastic's the same. So what I've done here, using a piece of white tack, I've temporarily fitted the nose undercarriage bay, as you can see there. And then what I've done on the bottom of here, I've added a couple of lumps of plastic, just roughly cut to shape. And then what will happen is when that goes in, that will actually sit on top of the nose gear, so that when the fuselage halves come together, it's a nice solid sort of click-in fit. So hold the fuselage halves together like that, and you can see now that cockpit is in there and nice and solid. You can also see I've sanded out that piece of plastic on there, that white piece I added. So yeah, so now when we actually hold it like that and we put the canopy in place, you can see that got the fuselage halves out. There we go. Yeah, it's going to be quite problematic holding all this together, but you can see that looking through the glazing, we will actually see the cockpit quite prominently. So we're going to have to do a nice bit of painting and washes and stuff on there, and you can see that in there the cockpit is definitely required. Now I do know, I mentioned that company Metallic Details, I think they're called. They actually do a cockpit set for this, a resin cockpit set, a drop-in, so you could always go down that route. If I build another one of these, as in the Lizard scheme, I will probably use all of their aftermarket and because they do lots and lots of bits and pieces for this actual model. So basically I'm just going to do a bit more fettling and fitting on here, and I'm also going to add some plastic to here because it looks like on the real thing the actual instrument panel is quite pronounced, and you know it's sort of quite up high in the screen, so I'm going to sort of build that up a bit as well. And yeah, then we'll get on and do some painting on it. So we'll call that a day for part one. And as I say, I'm basing this around the novice, the beginner. And here what I'm doing is showing you how to use an old, unused cockpit out of a kit and basically cut it around, make it fit. I have had some comments about, you know, not spending extra money on aftermarket and resin and stuff, and rather people would like to see how I actually go about you know, doing stuff without actually spending any money, and also without trying to sell you any resin as well. So this is basically how you go about it. Just cut and carve and sand and all bits and pieces like that, and it will all come together and give you a nice looking model for no additional expense. Of course, that is it, as long as you've got this cockpit here. Now, I'm tempted to kind of take a mould off of this in case I want to do another one, but as I say, you can buy the aftermarket cockpit anyway. So yeah, there we go. It's still a bit over to the left. I want to do some more work on that and get it to move over a bit more. So we'll call that a day for part one. And I'll see you back in part two, and we'll look at building up this instrument panel and we'll get the cockpit painted.